So next up, a lot of people think in terms of days, weeks, months, or years, maybe just the next election cycle. But our next speaker is thinking in terms of decades.
Next up, we have Gabor Gurbacs. Gabor is the strategy advisor at VanEck, CEO of Pointsville, and an architect of many regulated Bitcoin funds and indexes today.
Gabor is going to overview Bitcoin and stablecoin adoption throughout the next decade. Please give him a warm welcome to the stage.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for making time, for those of you who choose to be here instead of having espressos outside. We're going to talk about the next decade of Bitcoin and stablecoin adoption. And this is going to be a little bit different of a view that you're hearing at this talk. Everything that could have been said about financial freedom and Bitcoin's mechanism has been said, in my opinion, and I cannot add any more value to it. However, I want you to think about some of the macroeconomic drivers that will lead to Bitcoin's adoption, and I'm going to show those in a few summary slides. So my eyesight is a little bit bad, so I'm going to walk here. I want to tell you a little bit about the mission and history of the firm VanEck that I work with and why I ended up joining Bitcoin. VanEck as a firm has been established in 1955, and it has been investing into post-World War European reconstruction. The founder of the firm is called John VanEck, and he's investing money in the 50s into rebuilding Europe and made a good bit of money in his work. And in 1967, he had 3 small kids, and a professor from Europe has came over called Ludwig von Mises, who you might have heard about, those of you who are fans of Austrian economics. So Mr. VanEck actually ended up selling all his investments and started studying in evening school with 3 kids with Ludwig von Mises. And in 1968, he created the first ever gold fund. So since then, VanEck has built the first gold fund, managed gold funds in an era where gold was illegal in the United States and highly regulated elsewhere. And so I joined this team because I think VanEck is going to be able to bridge the gap for Bitcoin, similarly what we've done with gold. So over the past 8.5, 9 years, I've built VanEck's Bitcoin initiatives, and I'm sort of the guy who delivers the bad news to regulators that Bitcoin is here to stay. And so I work with them to make sure that we can integrate into the existing system and not just overthrow it. Obviously, this is a philosophy that many of you don't share in the room, but I think it's very important to work with the world as it is and not just think about it as we want it to be. Bitcoin is near and dear for me because I'm from the country of Hungary. Hungary is a small country that was under Soviet oppression, and my family's property has been confiscated. Hungary is also home for the largest hyperinflation that a country has ever experienced. So for me, having my family's history and property being confiscated and Hungary going under hyperinflation, I said that this is not going to happen to my generation. So I'm actively working on Bitcoin in the past 9 years to integrate it into mainstream law. One thing, so I had some of the first indices and exchange-traded products approved into the legal system. I think some of the new Bitcoin-based products and stablecoin-based and gold-based products that are coming up will also be acceptable for regulator, if it will be up to me. And so that's what I'm working on. The firm I work with is roughly, in the US it's 60 billion, globally roughly an $80 billion firm. We own about 5 to 7% of all gold miners and some parts of Bitcoin miners as well. And so that's a quick summary about VanEck and a little bit about my background. Now let's go to the macroeconomic facts that are going to shape the next decade. In my opinion, Bitcoin and generally Bitcoin adoption is where it is and accelerating, not just because people want more economic freedom, but it's also because we're at the cusp of a mobile wallet revolution that is driving adoption. So, so think about this. By 2024, 50% plus of all e-commerce transaction, meaning anything that is purchased online, will be done from a mobile wallet. That means, think about Tether, think about Bitfinex, think about crypto exchanges, payments, PayPal, and mobile wallets that are not credit cards or debit cards. Only, I think the stat, I need to look at it closer, only about 20-some% of the transactions will be done from a credit card, and probably about 10% of the transactions will be done in a cash basis. So 2024, half of the world's online commerce will be done through wallets. So it matters what we put into those wallets. I want to see Bitcoin, stablecoins, and gold-based stablecoins in those wallets. So mobile revolution is underway, and a population dynamics change is underway that's complementing the digital wallet revolution. Right now, about 1/3 of the world is under 20 years of age. So 34% of all people are less than 20 years old. Another 20% of people, other 33% of people are less than 40 years old. These groups are digital natives, and in the next 10 to 20 years, a tremendous amount of power and money is going to be transferred to people who don't know credit cards. So I want this group to own Bitcoin, and that's what I'm working on with many of you in this room. The world's GDP is about $96 trillion. Out of that $96 trillion, about $6 to $8 trillion will be passed down to this emerging generation who are using online wallets just in the next 20 years, roughly. The $6 to $8 trillion that is being transferred down to a new generation will be reinvested in Bitcoin, stablecoins, tokens of all sorts, esports, and digital experiences. So again, think about, just to walk through the slides, these are the three macro drivers for the next decade of adoption. So we have mobile wallets being the primary ways of payments. We have a population dynamics, so we'll have 70% of the world population knowing digital wallets only and potentially not credit cards. And all the money that right now baby boomers are owning will be passed down to people, and that are digital natives and mobile wallets first. So 20 years from now, I think the room that's going to be here will not know what value investing is or dividend investing is, but they will know what Bitcoin is. And that's what I want you to keep in mind. So time is on our side, and so again, these are the three things that you should think about. The world is actually a really difficult place. Some of you I have already heard that from speakers. Some countries are losing as much as 90% of their money purchasing power every year, and inflation is steadily increasing around the world. So this is some of the numbers that you see out of Turkey and Venezuela are just downright crazy. You see numbers like 80, 90% asset depreciation and purchasing power depreciation in a single year against the US dollar. The US dollar in itself has lost 10% over the past year. This is just after COVID official numbers, but real purchasing power decline is 30%. So 30% decline in the dollar plus 90% decline in some of these currencies, we see it very quickly that inflation is eating away people's purchasing powers and value. So one of the things that people don't think about too much is like, well, our currency is depreciating. But the question is, how bad can it be? I brought you the example from my home country, Hungary. This is actually what you're seeing is the largest banknote that has ever been printed. The text says 1 milliárd pengő, which means a billion pengő, bill pengő. That means, a billion is 10 to the 9, so 9 zeros. So it's a billion pengős, so 18 zeros. So this banknote is on the streets that Hungarian man is sweeping. So a billion pengős, and a few hundred of them couldn't buy a loaf of bread. This was in the late 1930s. The Hungarian pengő has halved in value in every 9 hours. Every 9 hours, you lost half of your currency's value. So what I want you to take away from this is hyperinflation happens fast. And a lot of the countries that are going under double-digit inflation today are actually in a very similar trajectory than Hungary was in the mid-50s, and then things happened fast. The only way to fix the currency was to reintroduce another currency, dropping 29 zeros. 29 zeros. And basically, Hungary, you couldn't have commerce in fiat currency terms for about 12 to 13 years. Now, the solution that sort of central banks cooked up to this is to buy gold. So currently, the largest holders of gold in the world is the United States, Germany, and Italy, France, Russian Federation. You see the table. And there's a really interesting trend that the world is buying gold in order to hedge against inflation. The trend is Western societies are printing more fiat, and the East is buying more gold. So you see just on the screen that India, Turkey, Egypt, Iraq, and some of the other countries in the East are buying gold. Remember that table because those countries someday will buy Bitcoin. And so I'm in a good position to be able to work with some of those central banks in my job. And I do think that from that list in the next 5 years, we'll see one or two at least buying gold and Bitcoin. More gold definitely, and hopefully Bitcoin. So I wanted to show you the sort of like the potential. The potential of Bitcoin to me is first the market capitalization of gold. This chart is a little bit old, but depending on who you talk to, if you look at the size of countries versus gold, basically gold would be the third or the fourth largest country, again, depending who you talk to. And I think Bitcoin can get there in time. Bitcoin is, and such as, Bitcoin will be a geopolitical football, as I like to say in the future. This is actually one of the memes that one of our gold partners have created. The East is buying gold from the West, and the question is, who is winning? No one is winning. No one is winning because purchasing power is declining, and yeah. So I believe that Bitcoin and stablecoins do change the game. So far, gold purchases have been really, really difficult for central banks. I think it's about to change with the introduction of Tether Gold. Tether Gold is an asset that's roughly $400 million of value right now. It's literally digital gold. I also, for the group here, I want you to know that a lot of countries will not buy Bitcoin in the next 10 years. They will buy gold. And they will not understand Bitcoin for a long time. And that's okay. They'll buy dollars, they'll buy gold, but that way they will learn about Bitcoin. And so my bet, actually, is that from the top 20 central banks, 2 in the next 2 decades will own a digital version of gold, and that will actually onboard them to Bitcoin. And the interesting thing, I use the analogy of gold, my firm owning about 5 to 7% of all miners. We think that basically Bitcoin can be purchased and will be purchased by central banks. To show you the potential and just contextualize this, Bitcoin is roughly a $300 billion asset, and that might sound big to some of you in the room, but it's actually tiny. Gold is an $11.5 trillion asset today. So I illustrated on that chart that if Bitcoin were to grow to just 50% of the market capitalization of gold, with central banks adopting it, then we would see, let's see if my math is correct, we would see probably around a 17x upside, putting Bitcoin price around $350,000 per coin. I think it's actually possible. I think this could happen in the next 10 years, or in this decade, say. And actually, a friend pointed out that gold's market cap is going to grow significantly as well. I believe that gold's market cap can get to $18 trillion, and Bitcoin roughly around 5 to 6 in the next decade. It's not price predictions, but just wanted to show you that even compared to gold, we are very early. Then I have a slide for you. You've probably seen this before about Bitcoin's characteristics. In my opinion, there's no second best, as you have heard it before. Bitcoin is better money than fiat currencies and gold. However, we have a lot of work to do to help central banks and the big kind of institutions, people understand why that's the case. This is a sort of like an investment chart. I help sell a lot of funds in the Bitcoin space, and when you look at Bitcoin and add a small allocation to your portfolio, which all of you in this room own more than 3% of your net worth and Bitcoin, but the institutions that we work with do not. The story of this chart, if you added Bitcoin to your portfolio, actually it would have performed much better than a standard portfolio with equities and bonds. And actually the volatility of that portfolio would have not been significantly worse. Then let me just walk through quickly, and I think I'm going to be done with this presentation pretty early. So what's going to happen in the next decade with respect to Bitcoin adoption? I believe that there will be more Tether users, and we'll see more US dollars being adopted in the world. I love the dollar. I think the dollar is the third best currency in the world after gold and Bitcoin. And the dollar is going to be transported around the world through Tether railways. And actually, the dollar is going to onboard a lot more Bitcoiners. It already has, and I think El Salvador is one of the examples. On the political development side, we're going to see probably 3-5 more countries at least in the next decade adopting Bitcoin. On the legal tender side, CBDCs will be real. There's no escaping it. I hate to break it for all of you, but we can fight back as much as we want. 6 out of the 10 largest central banks already announced that they will launch a CBDC. That's bad, and there's actually 2 panels discussing it. But the upside of this is I believe that the private space, like the likes of Tether and stablecoins, can fight back and preserve some of our privacy through a public and private partnership. This is something. It's not part of the cypherpunk ethos to partner with central banks, and we're all trying to fight back. But I do encourage you all to actually try to think about how do you partner and educate these big banks so that they don't attack us. I spend about 70% of my brain power thinking about how are we not attacked by these big institutions, and how do we survive an extra 5 years. And I think the key is for all of you to talk to them and try to educate them and work. And all these, you see all these announcements and pre-announcements about countries adopting Bitcoin. These are small countries. We have so much work to do. We cannot rest on our laurels. We all need to go out and get those countries on board. And so just think about that, how much work there is to do, and please be part of it. And don't think that guys like me or anyone on the stage will be able to do the job alone, because we're just a small group of people, and we need all of you to help. So let's see, what's the other point? So here's another one. Central banks will buy Bitcoin and digitize gold. So XAUT specifically, which is Tether Gold. I don't think they have a choice. We'll see the adversarial nature of our time. We're going through a wartime, and Bitcoin and gold are basically money for enemies. We'll see central banks adopt Bitcoin and gold more significantly. So that's, I think, oh yeah, so I want to make a point here. Don't mix up politicians and governments with central banks. Everyone celebrates politicians, but the central banks are the decision makers. And banks and central banks drive economies. So think about that. You need to talk to the central banks, all of you. Then let's see. More assets will be issued on Bitcoin and stablecoins. So it is my belief that assets, like I have a company called Pointsville that serves 85 big brands, and those are, so we issue assets, and we don't use blockchains and stuff like that to do that, but we're going to use Bitcoin and stablecoins to connect those big companies into commerce, the Bitcoin economy and stablecoin commerce. I think a lot of assets will use Bitcoin as a base layer. You have seen a few smart contracting solutions today in the space, and I think those are going to be better used. However, I wanted to say again that those solutions are very early and, in my opinion, have terrible user experience. So if you work on something, work on the user experience. And if we have good user experience, there'll be more projects on Bitcoin. And then the last point I wanted to make is the following. So 1/3 of this group that is between 0 years old and 19 years old, this is 1/3 of the world, is going to have a digital first experience using mobile wallets. So those guys have a chance to adopt Bitcoin. Time is on our side, so if we can survive long enough in this space, Bitcoin will win. So what I urge you to do is sort of what I do in my life, is to be more measured. Don't attack governments immediately. Don't attack big companies immediately, but try to find ways to work with them. Because in my opinion, the only way to win is to work with those companies and introduce them to Bitcoin sort of from the inside out. And with that, I hope that you build more bridges with the world, with governments, with for-profit centralized companies. And I wish you success in that, and I hope I get to work with you.